10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All systems go.
You're listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by.
On the morning shift.
Anything
Could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. That was one of the most bizarre beginnings to the show we've had. I had a conference call last night, and so one plug from my computer that I was using was unplugged, and I had to plug it in. And I was wondering, why isn't it on the radio or whatever? And then all of a sudden, one simple plug. Well, welcome to One Simple Show today. It is our Climate Change Friday edition, and we're talking climate change and all of the things that it's affecting our world with, and what it is, and why is it here, and who's telling us what it is, and why are we listening to them, and why aren't we listening to other people who are just as qualified or whatever, but aren't being listened to by mainstream media, mainstream anything. And so we'll have the alternate view here on Sudbury News Talk. If you are really interested in something that's true, like facts, something that you would normally think you're going to mainstream media to hear, this is the show for you, because we're going to be talking about real facts, real things, and it may just surprise you. You may have this problem, this interesting thing in your brain happen when you hear it. Like you go, "What? How is that possible?" But it's your brain working. It's hearing different things that starts it to think, starts making it think and stuff. And it might have been dormant for a while. And it's just good to really open up your mind and really try to understand the world you're living in. So we talk about Sudbury topics here on Sudbury News Talk. We talk about world issues, and climate is something that affects each and every Sudburian. There's no doubt in my mind. We are going down the path of sustainable this, sustainable that, green this, green that, all these terms we've been hearing for years and years and years, coming out from international organizations of unelected officials that have been doing studies that we learned yesterday. Data can always be skewed and be, put in certain ways to what we want it to mean. And we're making decisions and making policies. Even our own town, even our own city, we're going down the road. Everything is, the science has been decided apparently, and you name it. So we'll talk about, is the science decided? Who's at the helm of all this stuff? It's only a small group of people. You'd be surprised. The rest just need to be paid off. Everyone's got a price, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And we'll make a link between climate and health somehow. You might think, well, how does climate have anything to do with the state of health of the world? But we're going to make that connection today and show you maybe what the plan is from these unelected international organizations that are trying to make policies that affect people in municipalities. So anyways, that's going to be the show. We're live on CKLU 96.7 FM. We're also streaming at cklu.ca. You just click on the Radio Player Canada app. You can stream us, download it, and you can take us with you and listen to us anytime on any device. And we're also streaming at facebook.com/Sudbury News, youtube.com/Sudbury News. Make sure to like, share, follow, all of those things, and mainly comment, because we'll do our best to read your comments, and then we'll get them up on the screen as well. For those watching, you can see the show on demand, Sudbury.news. Click on Sudbury News Talk. You can also catch it on X, formerly Twitter.com/Sudbury News after the show. It also lives on YouTube and Facebook after on demand. So we're grateful for you guys joining us. We have a little group on so far. We're looking forward to having our climate edition of the show today. And we'll start off with a little bit of weather. Speaking of climate, right? And remember, climate and weather are two different things, although there is climate as part of the weather, but a climate change ideology and what we're talking about has nothing to do with daily weather, really. weather is always going on, and climate is the long game, right? If our climate is rising in the planet, it's going at such a slow pace because it's the overall climate of the planet. So weather incidents happen all the time, whether it's thunderstorms, rain, sunny, windy, tornadoes, hurricanes, you name it. Weather is always happening. It always will happen. It always has happened. And climate is a whole other issue. Like, how much is the Earth warming or cooling? We're still in the latter part of an ice age, which tells you something. The latter part of an ice age means it's getting warmer naturally. So we were wondering, okay, it's getting warmer naturally, but that's not really talked about in mainstream media. There's no naturally warming talked about at all. It's all us, and it's always extreme, and it's always you're going to die, which is always, always. So speaking in absolutes, right? It's just not right. It's just not a real conversation. It's just not real science. It's junk science. And when they say the science is settled, that's most or all real scientists would scoff at that, because science is never settled, according to a real scientist. And that's just the way it goes. And we're going to unwrap and make connections and things today to do with weather and health and how they connect, and make a Sudbury connection and all that. Whenever we come back after the weather, after a little bit of a sports update and news headlines, and we'll do a deep dive into that. We'll have that, your comments, and more right after this. So currently it's 6 degrees, and it feels like 6 degrees. Mostly cloudy out there. Today, mainly cloudy, high of 17. The UV index will be 5 or moderate. Tonight, clearing this evening, fog patches developing overnight, the low of +4. So it's a little cool in the night, which I like for sleeping purposes. Saturday, increasing cloudiness. A 30% chance of showers late in the morning and early afternoon, and then a 70% chance of showers in the afternoon. Just in time for the weekend, there'll be fog patches dissipating in the morning, high of 15. And then your Sunday, looking at your long-range forecast, 30% chance of showers, high of 18. Monday, 30% chance of showers, high of 21. And then mix of sun and cloud, high of 19 on Tuesday. Cloudy, both for Wednesday and Thursday. 18 and 19 are your temperatures for those 2 days. You look at your weather, your satellite. So clouds, I guess, are rolling in. It was mostly clear overnight, but we got clouds all of a sudden. Not sure where they came from. According to the satellite, this was taken at 1:30 in the morning. That's your Sudbury weather, brought to you by SudburyWeather.ca. We'll be back with sports, news headlines, deep dive into climate and health, and we'll be back right after this. Stay tuned. Your Sudbury Five are in action tonight here in Sudbury against the London Lightning. It is Game 4. The series is 2-1 for the Lightning. If Sudbury wins tonight, they can tie it up and go into the finals. So make sure to get your tickets. Go to greatersudbury.ca/tickets, or just head over to the box office a little before 7 to get your tickets there. Or you can find out more information from the5.ca. And get out and support your Sudbury Five. And hopefully they can win tonight, tie it up, and go into a final game to decide who goes to the finals. So go Sudbury Five. Little look at your local news headlines. As soon as we have some check-ins here. Good morning, Judy. Thanks for being with us. Hopefully you're having a great morning. And Marianne as well. Good morning. Everyone from Greyberry, it's Grey here as well, liked and shared as usual. Monique, good morning, Sudbury. And David, good morning. Take care. Stay safe. You as well, David, good morning to you. Liette, good morning, everyone from Collingwood. Monique, good day, people, with an exclamation point. And Denise, blessings from Espanola. Yes, for sure. And Monique does say that Brazil is indeed underwater, and yes, they are. If you've been watching what's going on in Brazil, it's pretty bizarre. They've had a lot of flooding there, and again, right? It's like we would just assume that because it's everything climate change or whatever, people right away go, it's climate change. As if people lived 400 years ago, there were floods back then too, and there were all kinds of disasters. If you know anything about geology, a lot of formations in the world were caused by disasters and earthquakes and things like that a long time ago as well. So you don't just right away go to it's because of climate change. However, many will, because the news hypes up the idea of climate change to begin with, and then it hypes up when it happens, and it's all hype. It's a lot of hype. However, the reality is they have a huge flood going on there right now, regardless of who says why it is. It doesn't matter. It's a huge flood regardless. So if you haven't paid attention or you haven't seen it, go on YouTube, look up Brazil flood. It's a huge flood for sure. A lot of people are affected. People are dying from it. A lot of people are still missing. And you have a lot here, Denise. It looks like on infants and fetuses. Okay, so about donating your stem cells to studies. I'm just reading this because it is pretty long. And anyone who wants to read the comment can go there to donate. There's no cost to donate cord blood in the event that you have a family member who needs stem cell. So if anyone's interested in donating stem cells for a good cause, it looks like here, it's just that this is a very long explanation. Looks like it might be taken from the BWH, and you can find a doctor or request an appointment for location services. Stay informed. So anyways, that is there for anybody to read in the comments, and hopefully it stays there after the show as well. It looks like it's a good cause from what I can see. Vin, good morning. Thanks for being with us. Hey, good morning. Miles, good morning to you as well. And Miles, I know that you're interested in sports, so isn't that an interesting... I saw on social media this morning that they fired Sheldon Keefe as the coach of Toronto Maple Leafs and now have hired Mike Babcock. Now, I don't know if that's just a false thing or not, but to me, it was quickly I saw that. But anyways, I laughed and I was like, wow, the Leafs are an interesting team with the decisions they make. But anyways, I don't know. I don't have any comments about that. Not too long ago, Dubai was also... Oh, yes, a flood. You're right. Flooding in Dubai. Now, that's a weird one too, right? They're basically desert. Now, again, weather. Can we control weather? The answer is yes, we can. We have the ability to control weather. So how much of the disasters that are happening are actually controlled weather on purpose for some reason or another? It could be included as part of warfare, really. When you think of it, a country, if they have the technology to control weather, which is a good chunk of nations that would have that ability, you'd have to ask yourself how much of it is man-made. And if we're asking how much climate change is man-made, you can ask about how much weather and these weather incidents that we're having are man-made, because we can manufacture weather. We just can. It just is true. You can research that yourself. It's been around for many, many years, so you can look into that. 2 states having banned geoengineering and chemical spraying. So not a conspiracy theory if states are banning. Oh, that still doesn't stop the science magazines and the papers from still calling it a conspiracy theory. And they're saying these states are just buying into conspiracy theories. They will not ever give up on the whole conspiracy theory thing. I remember the first time I heard conspiracy theory was George W. Bush, when everyone was talking about 9/11 and all of the facts around that. And he said, we will not tolerate conspiracy theories. And I went, oh, that's a good, that's going to be the thing of the future. They're just going to say conspiracy theory for everything they don't want you to know. I was like, that is genius. That is genius for the sheeple out there that, don't look into things on their own or whatever. As soon as you say that word, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. No. Oh, no, I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those. I wasn't thinking for myself. Honestly, I wasn't trying to think. I admit it. I'm not going to think for myself. I'll continue to read the papers and just say whatever they tell me to say. I'm not one of those. Don't worry. So I really saw that kind of in the works back then. And it shows that I'm not biased towards anyone from any political leaning, because I thought that guy was as crooked as the day is long, and he is Republican, to which I would lean towards their ideology if I was American, for what the party stands for. But the guy was definitely not a person of truth in any way, shape, or form. The guy was very evil in many of the things he did. He lied to the American people all the time, pretended he was dumb, because that's what they do. They have to pretend they're dumb. They go to Ivy League schools and things like that, and then they pretend they're dumb, so then they have an excuse for people of why they're doing so many evil things. It's because he's so dumb. Well, that's not true, But anyways, I'm on a tangent right now. The military complex has a hold on all the weather and our lives, so that's a good theory. I wouldn't doubt that. They have the ability to do that. The technology is there. Are they using it? If you have technology, are you going to use it? I would think, yeah. Surprised no provinces have yet. Okay, stopped chemtrails, stopped spraying, chemical spraying of the people. Yeah, for sure. I don't think Canada's a different thing altogether. Like, we don't really take too many stands. I mean, we're lukewarm, we're socialist. I mean, we've bought this whole lie, hook, line, and sinker. We're going down that rabbit hole. We're going to be a leader of it all. We're going to be the leaders in this lie going forward for the world. When people accept that they're the problem and that the halls are empty and our voice matters, we can start to change things. And that is true as well. You can get a tax break of $10,000 for donating an organ. I did not know that. I believe the placenta is an organ and they use it for so many things. I think every woman deserves $10,000. Oh. So yeah, I guess that goes along with what you also shared. So I would encourage everyone to go there and read it and put the two together. From Denise. Vin, we may be past voice matters for sure. Freedom Convoy revealed this. All to be at the end. Yeah, all to end mandates. No communication ever came to fruition. Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. For sure, like we feel like, our voice matters or whatever, but then you have something as huge as what the truckers demonstrated, and then it shows, well, they can shut down your bank accounts. They can, take your money. They can throw you in jail and charge you. They can send in the military and the police to remove you by force. You know what I mean? Just invoke the Emergencies Act. Selling organs is a very big business in Canada. That's why they push the abortions. Interesting. Yes, well, I could see that. Organs from abortions are a thing. A lot of things from that. That is a huge topic, right? We haven't really handled that on this show yet, although we will at some point. Obviously, we're not afraid of any issue, but it's very divisive. And more divisive than anything else we talk about on this show. And meant to be. It's meant to be so. It's meant to be a dividing line, and there's a lot of information behind all of that. It's very sad. It's very sad where we've come to in a society where that is actually proudly spoken of as a victory for mankind, that we're able to abort millions of babies a year. And in the name of a right of a particular segment of society, which totally kiboshes the right of the individual being aborted. And so again, I just put it like that, and even that will trigger a lot of people, right? Because of what we believe, and we believe it very passionately. I just always say, what about the rights of the unborn? That's all I say. That if we talk about rights for everybody, and then it comes down to, well, when are they really a human? So when are you really killing? You know what I mean? That's an interesting conversation. And all you have to do is look at the, when you go in and you get pictures of the baby and all that, ultrasounds, and real science that shows when there's a heartbeat and when there's thought and when there's REM sleep and all these things. And so, okay, and at what point does this particular life form become a life form and all of that? And when does this life form, get rights? It's an interesting conversation. I think at conception myself, because once a life form is started, once that cell turns into two cells, it shows that life has happened, because you can't just have two cells out of one cell if there's not some kind of life happening. But that's me. That's just my opinion. And I I'm not saying it in a hateful way. I'm not saying it to judge other people. I'm not putting other people down. I'm just simply making one particular small point in a huge conversation when it comes to that. But we don't want to get into that conversation today. We don't want to be too derailed, because we have a lot to talk about today and make some connections. We'll just get on with some of the comments, and we'll head off to... I watched a podcast yesterday. Downtown Sudbury had Jeff McIntyre and Dario Zulich on it, but there was a problem with the audio. I couldn't really hear clearly what everyone was saying, and so I'll go back and watch that, and I encourage everyone, go to Downtown Sudbury's Facebook page, and you can watch that conversation if you're interested in some of the plans that are going on with the new arena and things downtown. Watch that. So there are some things I want to connect here. Remember back when, the pandemic was going on, and people were wondering why our chief medical officer here in town, head of the Sudbury Public Health, made over $800,000 in a short period of time, like in 1 year. Good morning, Chris. Thanks for being on. Much appreciated. But she made over $800,000, and it was due to overtime. Basically she was almost $350,000 was her regular pay, but for some reason during 2020 she was paid in 2021 for the work in 2020, which was the huge part of the pandemic. Over $800,000. So the news media just basically said, it's because she did a lot of overtime and things like that. And it's like, okay, well, a lot of people were doing overtime, and she got to stay home. So do you take that off of her pay? She didn't have to go into work or anything like that. She was working from home. So I don't understand it. To me, there's question marks to why she was paid that much money. Myself, I have that question. And then during that time too, just a little after, you have Dr. Teresa Tam. She comes out and says, so we're going to make a link today between climate change and public health. So then she came out and said, climate change and capitalism are the drivers of negative health. And what the heck, how do you make a statement like that? How does someone make a connection, right? So we'll begin today with where we left off yesterday, talking about Canada has so many billions of trees. It eats up so much carbon and emits so much oxygen out into the atmosphere. We then emit so much carbon. So what is our net in terms of our carbon output? Do the trees eat more carbon than we output? Well, there's an interesting interview that I think the BBC is having with the president of Ghana, and they're trying to hold him accountable for their climate policies and things. But the president of Ghana sets this particular reporter straight on this. So it's to do with the trees and net zero and all that. So he's the leader of a country, and sounds a little bit different than Justin Trudeau to me. We'll listen in here.
Let's take a big picture look at what's going on here. Over the next decade, 2 decades, it is expected that there will be $150 billion worth of oil and gas extracted off your coast. It's an extraordinary figure, but think of it in practical terms. That means, according to many experts, more than 2 billion tons of carbon emissions will come from your seabed.
Did you hear what he said? He said, according to many experts. That's what the media does all the time. Many Canadians say, many this, many that, according to many experts. So that's what the media has kind of gotten down to. They don't need to show who's saying what or it's just according to many experts. Oh, we all know the science is settled, right? Many experts say.
Those reserves and be released into the atmosphere. I don't know if you as a head of state went to the COP in Dubai.
Let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there. Do you know that Guyana has a forest forever that is the size of England and Scotland combined? A forest that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon? A forest that we have kept alive? A forest that we have kept alive.
Does that give you the right? Does that give you the right to release all of this carbon?
Does that give you the right to...
So do you hear how the reporter basically sounds like an activist? The reporter isn't necessarily asking questions. It's as if an activist is debating this president. It's not a reporter. They're not really finding out, wanting to ask him questions to get to the bottom of something. They have an agenda and they're going for it. And he sounds like an activist, not a reporter.
To lecture us on climate change. I am going to lecture you on climate change because we have kept this forest alive that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon that you enjoy, that the world enjoy, that you don't pay us for, that you don't value, that you don't see a value in, that the people of Guyana has kept alive. Guess what? We have the lowest deforestation rate in the world. And guess what? Even with our greatest exploration of the oil and gas resource we have now, we will still be net zero. Guyana will still be net zero. With all our exploration, we'll still be net zero.
Powerful words, Mr. President. But
I'm not completed as yet. I am not finished as yet. I am just not finished as yet. Because this is the hypocrisy that exists in the world. The world in the last 50 years has lost 65% of all its biodiversity. We have kept our biodiversity. Are you valuing it? Are you ready to pay for it? When is the developed world going to pay for it? Or are you in the pockets? Are you in the pockets of those who have damaged the environment? Are you in the pockets, are you and your system in the pockets of those who destroyed the environment through the Industrial Revolution and now lecturing us? Are you in their pockets? Are you paid by them? Are you paid to keep their message?
So the president is being more of a journalist than the journalist, right? The journalist is an activist. The president is just giving facts and then asking the journalist questions. Are you in the pockets of these people? And the journalist isn't going to answer it. He's not going to say, well, yes, we're paid off. First of all, we're paid off by the government who wants us to push this narrative because they want us to say that climate change is real so we can make policies that ultimately end in what the government wants, like their conclusion, right? It's not to save the environment. Governments aren't out to save the environment. Governments are out to make sure that they continue to exist. And what do? They govern people. And when they govern people and the people do what they say it's easier to govern. So it's basically for control. So that's what government's end game is, always will be. It's for bigger government and more control over the people. And that's it's always been historically, and that's all we're seeing today. So we're making those connections. And we talked about Theresa Tam, right? So we're saying, okay, environment. So environment, climate, our health minister here in Canada, this came out, I don't know, about a year ago, though, already. Yeah, pretty much a year ago. Last year, Dr. Theresa Tam lists climate change and capitalism. Like, capitalism comes into the picture, too, as drivers of negative health. Who knew that capitalism could make you sick? It's a driver of negative health. So, but we won't focus on the capitalism thing making you sick today, only the climate. So the climate is going to be moved into a health emergency into that realm. And now we have the WHO that wants to sign a treaty with all the countries of the world, basically giving them the power in the next emergency, and it could very well be a climate emergency because everyone's on board with the climate now. Like there's the majority of the people think there's a climate disaster. The earth is ending. We need to do something drastic right now. So we just need someone to tell us what to do. And who's going to do that? Who are you? They step up to the plate and they're going to tell you what to do, right? Sorry for that terrible rendition of the Who Are You, but I wanted to play it, but I knew it'd be flagged for copyright, so I couldn't. I also wanted to play Supertramp's Crime of the Century as well here on the show, just to go along with the video. But here's Dr. Martin talking about what is going on with the Who, and who started the Who, and who are they, and what are they up to, basically. And if you are interested in truth, if you really want to know, if you really want to peel away the curtain, if you really want to see who's going to be controlling you in the near future, just listen to this. And this is what I live for. Anyways, here you go. Thanks, Jerome, for sending this.
A very small number of criminal industrial conspirators decided to subordinate the entirety of the human population for the purpose of their sinister plans to enrich themselves while impoverishing and killing the rest of humanity. And I'm done being polite. We've long passed polite. When the words acceptable death rate become part of an industrial norm, we have lost the plot of humanity. And that's not my words. Those were the words of the World Health Organization and of Pfizer and of Moderna when they were given the authorization to begin the process of killing human beings in the interest of advancing their goals. Next slide. And I'm also not going to sugarcoat this. This is a criminal cartel. We are acting as though there's some sort of redeemable quality somewhere in some esoteric layer that somehow or another the World Health Organization must have some salutatory benefit. Well, I'm going to tell you, since its formation in the 1940s, the World Health Organization has been nothing more than a criminal cartel that has a sole and singular intent. And I will show you the document that proves what I'm saying. This is not an allegation. This is actually provable by their own words in their own hand. And they use a four-step process to execute every one of their nefarious plans. They begin by planning an exercise, then they go to the business of funding that exercise, then they create the rationale for the thing that they're going to do, and then they deploy and profit from it. And in violation of 15 U.S. Code Section 19, which for those of you listening, coincidentally started with the Clayton Act in the same year that the World Health Organization in the United States, 1913, the same year the World Health Organization's progenitors also started. So I find it fascinating that we passed the Clayton Act in 1913 and we set in motion 110 years ago the criminal conspiracy which we now call the World Health Organization. 110 years later. And in violation of TIFU, or TEFU, I don't even know how to say it, the TFEU, the treaty allegedly for the functioning of the European Union, which I think needs to now be called the Treaty for the Dysfunctional European Cabal, Article 101 unambiguously lays out the conditions that this was never a public health anything. It was racketeering for the purpose of instilling terror to adapt the behavior of a population. Period. That's what it was. That's what it always was. And we can come up with every theoretical argument we want to make about things, but the problem, even with the theory that we had an outbreak of something, is falsifiable for the data from Zurich that shows us that in the year of the death pandemic of the globe, life insurance companies paid $30 billion less in claims. Now, if there's a medical professional or a social professional or anybody else who wants to debate that we could develop a virus cunningly that could find out your bank account, your insurance policy statements, and whether you're paid up on your premiums, that's a big ask. it turns out that the data is unambiguous. We did not have a pandemic. We had genocide. And we need to call it what it is. Next slide. When I say we planned it, let's make sure we understand exactly the not-so-fine print of the fine print. And I want to call your attention first to the right-hand column of the slide. This is the 2011 data that the World Health Organization, the Wellcome Trust, PATH, and the Gates Foundation did on their wonderful worldwide program for a malaria vaccine for children under the age of 6 months of age. And in their clinical trial, it's helpful to point out that they murdered 66 children in the vaccine group and then cunningly used the term control for a control group in which they murdered 28 children. Now, the reason I said murdered and the reason why I use that term is because it's exactly what it was. Because it turns out that this control group was not a saline injection. It was not some sort of innocuous, innocent thing. It was actually a cocktail of other known pathogenic disease-carrying injections. The control group was known to kill people, and the experimental control group was actually theoretically maybe going to kill people. And what we did was we actually went ahead and murdered them all. And cunningly, under Article 5, Section 13, which I've put on this slide, I want you to understand why I said, at its formation in 1947, when the WHO was funded and founded, it was funded and founded by people intent to commit a crime because of their own language. Section 13 of Article 5 ends with the following statement. Immunity from personal arrest or detention, blah, blah, blah. Immunity from legal process of every kind. Now, if you didn't intend to commit a crime, why would you need to give yourself permanent and absolute immunity from every form of prosecution, and it's worse, even investigation for prosecution of every kind? People sit there and pretend, well, that's like diplomatic immunity. Do you realize this isn't even meeting the standard of diplomatic immunity? This is a criminal organization who set in motion their own law to protect themselves against crimes they knew they were going to commit. And when I say they knew they were going to commit, I mean they knew it. Because their first Director General, none other than Dr. René Sand, who happened to be in the hospitality of the Germans in Dachau in 1940 earlier, in 1947, mysteriously, with the largesse of the Rockefeller Foundation, was nominated to become the first Director General of the WHO. And within 5 short years, René Sand decided to authorize the real purpose of the WHO in writing by then Director General Dr. Brock Chisholm, who advocated for population control as its primary objective. Does that sound like public health to anyone in this room? This is not public health. This is the advancement of the same genocidal program that began with the Carnegie Foundation's funding of the eugenics office at Cold Spring Labs in the United States in 1913 under the philanthropy of Andrew Carnegie. People, stop fooling yourself. We debate the leaves on the tree of what we call this pandemic thing, but we're not going to the root. This was an organized crime, racketeering entity set up to give itself first absolute immunity and then execute its plans to make sure it controls who lives, who dies, and who gets any chance at life. And if you think that I am somehow inflating numbers, let me be unambiguous. Under every treatment of tax provision, if I were to tell you that there is an 88% controlling interest of any organization, you might conclude that that actually aggregates into a controlling interest. And it turns out that if we look at the foundation donations to the World Health Organization, 88% of those come from a single organization, the Gates Foundation. That constitutes a violation of every competitiveness law in Europe and every competitiveness law in the United States. This is absolutely not only not an independent, charitably funded donation, but more importantly, under the tax laws on both sides of the Atlantic, this constitutes directed donations which specifically are forbidden and do not have any place anywhere in the Charter of the World Health Organization or any of the UN-affiliated organizations. When I say this is a crime, I mean it's a tax crime, a racketeering crime, a money laundering crime, and now the crime of racketeering leading to murder and global terrorism. Next slide. I told you that the second thing after they plan it is they fund it. And why don't we use the criminals' language in their own words, because it's the best way to say it. When they actually planned the release of the use of a biologically modified chimera associated with the model derived from coronavirus, they actually said the following: to sustain the funding base beyond the crisis, we need to increase the public understanding for the needful medical countermeasures such as a pan-influenza or pan-coronavirus vaccine. Now, let me pause for just one moment and remind you that the crisis that they were speaking of was a crisis of diminishing funding. There was no health crisis. This was a crisis of their coffers were starting to run dry. That's the crisis. And let's read on. A key driver is the media, and the economics will follow the hype. We need to use that hype to our advantage to get to the real issues. Investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process. That is officially the statement made by the conspiratorial cabal that by that time was the decade of vaccines put in motion in 2011 by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board of the World Health Organization, and it was the funding base for Peter Daszak's partnership with the chimeric production of pathogens both in North Carolina and in Wuhan. So don't tell me that we have to do an investigation into where this came from. The criminals have admitted to it in their own words. Next slide. And now we get the fun one that no one in Congress is willing to address, which is the elephant in the room. On October the 21st, 2014, despite the multiple conversations between Senator Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci, where we've been told that Rand Paul has done everything he can to put Fauci on the ropes, he has had in his possession the letter that you see on the left. And it is the letter, conveniently on NIAID letterhead, sent to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which unambiguously states that during the gain-of-function moratorium, which, by the way, if we use the word moratorium, feels like that means you're supposed to stop. Why don't we go ahead and look at two pieces of this letter. First, the second bullet under Project 1, which, by the way, was not part of the original grant. This was to look at the novel functions of the virus pathogenesis in vivo. You know what that means? In living systems. The grant was supposed to be clinical simulations and models, but this grant was modified with this letter to say we were going to authorize gain-of-function research during the moratorium in living systems. And then we love the last paragraph of this letter, which conveniently says, as your grant is currently funded, this pause is voluntary. How many times have you met a voluntary moratorium? And the best part about it is that if we look at the very last line, or continue to conduct the applicable gain-of-function research until the end of the currently active budget period. But here comes the problem. You know who is supplying the budget? An indefinite term, unlimited amount contract from DARPA and from NIH. Isn't it convenient to have a perpetually funded project that needs to stop when the money runs out, when you find out that there is no point where the money runs out because there is no end to the thing that has no end? And lest you think that I'm making an allegation, which I'm not, I'm making an accusation. Let's be clear. And there's a big difference. I'm not alleging anything. They actually went to the trouble of telling us that it was going to be the Wuhan virus that was going to get us. As you see on the right-hand side of the screen, published in 2016, March 14th of 2016, the SARS-like Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1, and I quote, is poised for human emergence. Does that sound like we're just surprised that something in Wuhan went a little haywire in December of 2019? Or does it feel like we were told, look at Wuhan, and look at coronavirus, and look at what we've been doing to manipulate coronavirus in Wuhan and at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and lo and behold, we're going to go ahead and tell you that we're ready to release it in 2016. Next slide. We're almost done. And then they created it. Now, all of you know that I am criticized globally for my use of the term biological warfare. I do that because I am credentialed to do that. I happen to be, for the United States government, in the early part of the 2000s and the latter part of the 90s, a person who was sent around the world to look at the proliferation of biological and chemical weapons. I'm acutely familiar with the definition of what a biological warfare agent is in the 18 U.S. Code, the criminal code of violations of biological and chemical weapons. And so my assessment is, in fact, professional and right. And the reason for that is I'm the one credentialed to make that determination for the United States government for many years. That's why I say it. But let's pretend for the moment that I'm just a nut job. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So why don't we look at what the criminals said themselves, shall we? In 2005, at a conference sponsored by DARPA and the MITRE Corporation, Ralph Baric, the architect of the lethal strand that has been injected into millions and billions of people's arms, that Ralph Baric was sponsored to present the following, and let's go ahead and use his words, presentation: synthetic coronaviruses, biohacking, bio-warfare enabling technologies. Does that sound like a public health distribution program? Does that sound like something that is accidentally misinterpreted to mean something else? Or does biological warfare enabling technology sound like not countermeasures or pandemic preparedness? It sounds to me like biological warfare enabling technologies. And the reason why I have that hunch is what followed was he received, next to his NIAID grants, non-competitive DARPA grants in matching funds for over $140 million of aggregate funding going into his and his related programs on synthetic biological warfare enabling technologies. So do I have a problem calling the injection a biological warfare enabling technology? Absolutely not, because that's what they called it. And we know that they knew they called it that on September 18th, 2019. Because on September 18th, 2019, the racketeering, co-conspiring cabal of interlocking directorates, also known as the World Health Organization, said that they were going to conduct an experience for the world that was going to be a rapidly spreading pandemic due to a lethal respiratory pathogen. The lethality in that statement is the problem. They didn't say we're going to maybe get a little bit of sniffles going around. They said we were going to actually have the promulgation of a deadly agent. And the stated reason, in September 2020, the progress indicator is that the world would accept a universal vaccine. Not, we'll look at other options of treatment. Not, we'll have a look at what might be early intervention, as Dr. McCullough has so clearly advocated for in many, many, many instances. Not that. We stated on September 18th, 2019, we were intending to kill. and we were intending to kill to create the fear that would drive people to accept something that without coercion no one would have accepted. And that's published by the criminal racketeers. Next slide, and there's only 2 to go if you're following. Deploy and profit from it. We were told investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process, and lo and behold, guess what they saw? Profit at the end of the process. 2022, $100 billion for Pfizer of public funds. Moderna, after lying to the Congress in October of 2020 when they were asked to actually verify whether NIAID was promoting an injection that would enrich NIAID, where Anthony Fauci and the entire team at NIH said that they had no financial interest in their recommendation, they receive a back payment royalty of $400 million for the first payment of the royalty. $400 million. More than any Institute of Health has ever received in a single payment for a single invention in the history of American medical research. And lo and behold, what do we receive after that? A request from the World Health Organization to expand its budget by 11% to make sure that the people who profited from it donate to it. And guess what they just did? They laundered the money right back. That's what they did. Next, and now you get the final slide. This is not a public health crime. This is actually not a constitutional crime. This is a criminal act done by a criminal institution established to enable criminal behavior since its foundation in 1947. That is what this is. And we should not be debating the merits of democracy or liberty or anything else, as irrational as that would be if we stood at a bank robbery and debated the merits of printing dollar bills. The problem is not the dollar bills, it's the bank robber. And the problem here is not health, and it's not public health, and it's not the suppression of information and the suppression of dissident views and the absolute unconscionable treatment of physicians around the world and academicians around the world who spoke out against this. That's not the crime. The crime is that we had criminal racketeers who conspired and developed a, quote, emergency. The same criminal racketeers planned, manufactured, and did all agency capture to make sure that you were told that you would use terms that they tell you to use. Vaccine, face mask, health, social distancing, none of which had ordinary use definition. So we just used them. Criminal racketeers price fixed with interlocking directorates where known competitors came together and fixed prices in direct collusion in violation of both European Union standards and in violation of both the Sherman and the Clayton Act in the United States. These were crimes. It was organized crime, and we should treat it as such. Criminal racketeers publicly lied under oath. And this resulted in the death and destruction of liberty, and most importantly, the death and destruction of the integrity of well-meaning people who sit here today doing everything they can within their power to try to treat the calamities created by this catastrophe. I will not for a moment denigrate the multiple contributions of amazing academic and medical professionals who've tried desperately to step into the gap and stop the corrupt outcomes of these crimes. But I will, without doubt, say the following. Until we treat this as a criminal conspiracy of criminal racketeers resulting in global terrorism for the purpose of profiteering and murder, until we have that conversation, we're having the wrong conversation. Because we are not here to debate the merits of a modified agreement for a criminal racketeering organization. We are here to end the criminal organization itself. This is my call to every single person on this planet. Don't just limit the power of the WHO. Destroy the WHO. Thank you very much.
Destroy the WHO. Well, there you go. That's the, I would say he makes a really good argument to be able to do that. And a lot of people think, well, how could that happen? That could never happen. It would take a lot of people in order to make that happen, right? But it doesn't take a lot of people. It just takes money. And that's pretty much all it comes down to. And as we see here with two articles, one from Sudbury.com back a little while ago about our own on boots on the ground person here in Sudbury. They were paid $800,000 for 1 year's work. When was the last time you made $800,000? As my Google isn't coming up right now. Just this never happens on this laptop, by the way. But here you go. Okay, so Dr. Penny Sutcliffe, 2021 salary. I just Googled it. How much did Penny Sutcliffe make during the pandemic, and it came up right away, and it took it from the Sudbury.com article. Penny Sutcliffe's 2021 salary. She was public health Sudbury and District's medical officer. She made $800,726, according to the Sunshine List released that year. The overtime was related to her work during the COVID-19 pandemic when the region was without an associate medical officer of health, and Sutcliffe was covering those duties as well. So they're trying to make a reason why she was making $800,000. So you just remember the last time you were at work when they gave you more responsibilities and your overtime added up to almost 3 times what your regular salary was. That's never happened, right? So we ask ourselves, how does this happen when there's only a few people? All you need is a few people and a lot of money, So, yeah, Penny Sutcliffe, $800,000 in 1 year. And that's it. That's the show for today. We are trying to connect some dots, and I hope that connected some dots for you. And if you want to go back or share that video with somebody and they're wondering what the WHO actually is, and not what CBC is telling them, or the BBC or CNN or any other news outlet, they can do the research themselves. They can say, no, that's wrong. That's wrong for that man to make those accusations, and they can then do their own research and find out for themselves. And that's what it's all about. We're just presenting another point of view, right? And it sounds like a pretty darn scathing point of view, if you ask me. Way more than you hear on any of the news outlets I've been able to listen to or read. So there you go. That's your Sudbury News, brought to you by me. AJ Walsh, I'm glad to be here with you today. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Stay safe and stay happy. And we'll see you on Monday, God willing. Same time, same place. Stay tuned now for Earshot Daily on CKLU 96.7 FM. Ciao, everyone. Have a great weekend.
This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.